What's up, Mac Nostalgia? Dave here to react to, discuss, explain Amazon and MGM's final acquisition of the James Bond franchise. Amazon now has full creative control, creative freedom to use and exploit the James Bond 007 IP as they wish. Barbara Broccoli and her family sold for over $1 billion to Amazon these rights. Now, of course, this all dates back to 2021 when Amazon bought MGM for a price several billion more than the original evaluation. And a large part of that was because MGM had the film rights to the James Bond franchise, of course. And they've, James Bond been a long established pillar at MGM, of course. Despite that sale, though, the Broccoli family still maintained creative control over the James Bond franchise and thus controlled the output. Of course, that, goes back to Albert Broccoli, a longtime film producer of many James Bond films, and then, of course, his children. Barbara Broccoli had been the new figurehead. And from everything we know, the Broccoli family had been really protective and careful stewards of James Bond storytelling, right? There was a clear reason why we never got a James Bond TV show. We never had James Bond spin-offs, right? The extent of that would be like video games, It was really a big screen property. And seemingly, now it's coming out a bit more, is that the lack of movement for a new iteration of James Bond following Daniel Craig's final go-around in No Time to Die in 2021, the reason there hasn't been any headway there is because the Broccoli family and Amazon have been kind of butting heads over the direction. And now that's all gone, From what we're understanding, Barbara Broccoli's partner in all this, Michael Wilson, had wanted to retire, and it seems like Barbara just kind of like gave up fighting the good fight, so to speak, and cashed out as a result. And, unfortunately, I find this pretty concerning because, having someone who wants to be a clear steward of an IP is rare these days, right? Usually it's just people who want to exploit it financially, right? We see that across entertainment companies, no matter who's involved. And now, are we going to get a James Bond TV show on Amazon? And how's that going to go? There's a quote going around about it being no different than a Jack Reacher show soon enough. That's concerning, I like Amazon's Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. Polarizing show, James Bond, I would love it to get going on the big screen. I do think there's some ways to kind of modernize that storytelling approach. Namely, next James Bond film series should be more serialized. The Craig Bonds were not consistently serialized. I think you need that with your franchise storytelling now. That's kind of a no-brainer. But, if we get lots of James Bond spin-offs and 007 stuff, I don't know. It could quickly get diminishing returns. It could quickly sully the brand. And that's the one thing that's been consistent with James Bond brand is that is it the biggest film franchise in the world? No. But it's always been successful. And it's always been intelligent. It's always been for adults. And it's always maintained a core audience across generations at this point because of that. Despite the fact that, the James Bond films, they're up and down across the history, the 25 or whatever that we've gotten. And, I'm just a bit worried now that I don't trust Amazon with that, right? MGM under Amazon hasn't exactly proven much either, right, in terms of continuing things on the big screen. So, just a lot of unknown here. Of course, the next question would be, who is going to be the next James Bond? This is something we talked about after No Time to Die, released, because it's the obvious question, the obvious talking point, and then really nothing's changed in the 3+ years since that movie came out. A movie I liked quite a bit. Who's up for grabs? Who's new in the mix? I think someone talked about that time that still makes a lot of sense would be Josh O'Connor. Showing a debonair side on the Netflix's The Crown, also showing a lot of physicality and uniqueness in Challengers last year. I would love to see that. Regé-Jean Page from Bridgerton, early Bridgerton. he fits the bill in many respects. Hasn't been quite as hot as he was a few years ago, but a name in the mix. I think the question too they always have to think about with this is whoever they're going to cast needs to play James Bond for a long time. Think like 10+ years, right? So a lot of the famous names that have been talked about a lot over the years don't make a lick of sense in this role. Tom Hardy, Henry Cavill, Idris Elba, they're all too old. Like, this doesn't make any sense to pick those guys. Also, I think there is something to be said about picking someone who's not incredibly famous, who has a bit of an unknown quality to them, or at least is a bit not fully established, the mainstream level. That was certainly the case with casting Daniel Craig. I think of guys like Jack Lowden or Jack O'Connell. I think they kind of fit the bill, kind of obvious. The thing is, like, none of these people are really jumping out per se as like the clear pick. For a while there was a lot of like heavy rumors that Aaron Taylor Johnson was actually the favorite of the Broccoli family. And I'd have to imagine that has lost steam since Craven the Hunter performed so poorly. On the other hand, I thought he looked pretty good in the suit in Bullet Train. I believe in it. I would buy into Aaron Taylor Johnson, but he might be a bit too famous. I'm not sure. Honestly, I think my favorite pick, something I've been on for a while now, would be Harry Lawdy, who of course broke out on HBO's Industry. And it was just announced the same day this Bond news dropped that Harry Lawdy will not be returning to Industry for season 4 due to scheduling conflicts. Those scheduling conflicts are obviously not James Bond, but maybe they could be. I would root for it. I think he's someone who's young enough, looks the part, British, also not super famous. He's not a complete unknown. We know he's good, and he's getting in a lot more stuff quite quickly. He was just in Joker 2, but he's not mainstream. And I think he could really slip right in. Yeah, you have to bulk up a little bit. He can handle that. I don't know. I think Josh O'Connor or Harry Lawdy are my picks. I have really no inclination on like when we would have any realistic idea of like when this would happen, when we get an announcement. Like, would they really spin this up and running by the end of the year? I mean, it depends how quickly that deal officially closes. It's not closed yet, but I don't know, man. We'll probably get news about some kind of development, right? Maybe even if it's just script writers or a showrunner or director, it's detached, whoever it is, this year for sure once it's closed. But I don't know if we'll get the casting for quite some time. This also brings back into fold the notion of certain auteur directors have wanted to come to the property, like Quentin Tarantino and Christopher Nolan over the years, but of course they wanted full creative control, as they should, as they have that right as creators. The Broccoli family would never acquiesce to something like that. Maybe something like that is now on the table. We'll see. Denis Villeneuve, be interesting. You need someone who's available, though, right? If they want to shoot this thing next year, we'll say. Hard to say. Let me know, though, how you feeling about Amazon becoming the new stewards of James Bond? Are you worried? Are you excited? Who do you want to be the next James Bond? The eternal question we've been asking for years. Let me know. And for more James Bond talk as the opportunities arise, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.